We have quite an esteemed panel here before you, and I think it would probably be good to open the floor to discussion and any questions anyone may have for our panel. Whilst you have a think about your questions, I'm going to kick off by asking what members of the panel would suggest could be a takeaway for us all today when we go back to our respective offices, get on with our daily lives. What would be the key message you'd have from today for us to bear in mind working in the future?
Well, I think it won't surprise you on the basis of my presentation is what to take away. How do we help find simple ways of developing a more inclusive design dialogue? And I think that's a challenge for us as professionals, because I think that will achieve better outcomes for everyone.
My thoughts would be the importance of having a vision, having a clear brief from the outset, and then working collaboratively to work to that objective, and be able to respond to any setbacks or changes that may come about as part of the stakeholder engagement. I think it's important to be flight of foot, but nevertheless not forget about what you're trying to achieve at the outset and get everybody's buy-in.
My thoughts on key takeaway today is around skills and resources, actually. A lot of people talk about skills on the construction side of things, but actually skills and resources on the local authority planning side. Everybody complains about planning and the process, and actually it isn't the planning process, it's the resources we're applying to it. There are some incredibly talented people working in local authorities, and I think you've heard from 3 of them today. That are actually very passionate, they care about the built environment, they care about the legacy that they want to leave, and their members want to leave communities. And it's about getting the right resources in the right place, but giving them the right tools to do the job. I'm a bit concerned that perhaps we might be overcomplicating and constantly assuming the lowest common denominator through various design codes, design guides and stuff that we've heard today.
I think for me, it's that collaboration starts really early in the process, and it's not just the kind of classic, like, here's a development scheme, let's start asking some people about it. It's kind of the framework you set well in advance of that, and how you kind of get buy-in, which then allows a kind of positive collaboration which isn't adversarial to kind of really bear the fruits and kind of create a great place.
From my perspective, it's about the application of policy, which obviously developed at a government level, but it's how it's applied on the ground through collaborative working, vision, leadership, using the right tools and techniques, and seeing the good practice and sharing of that that's coming from it.
2 points, if I may. One cheeky political point, as Mike alluded to quite quickly in passing. Cambridge South Midlands is a consequence of strategic planning, properly resourced, and at that time, statutory strategic planning. We need more of it. We need it to be done properly. We need it to be done well. Practical point is that the issue of major housing schemes following even the grant of reserve matters, certainly following outline, is that there's an awful lot that the local authority needs to be doing, or the public sector in general needs to be doing in partnership with developers, even once it seems like there's an implementable permission. It's all the other stuff. And I think we could learn a lot from some other countries about what the public sector in total does once the go-ahead has been given.
Mine doesn't really relate to the presentations that we've had, it's conversations that I've had during the breaks, about the fact that you've got architects and you've got planners, and we work in a similar sort of realm, but there's still this sort of barrier that exists between us. And it's about trying to figure out whether it's language, it's terminology, it's perspective. There is something that is stopping the freedom of conversation. And I was talking very quickly with the gentleman in the room earlier about the fact that when I started my planning qualification, I was in a room filled full of built environment professionals, lecture theatre, somewhat similar to this. And they were shouting out courses, and the first course obviously is architecture because it begins with an A. Everyone got up out, left the room. I didn't see them for 4 years. And these are people that I'm now potentially across the table from. And I think there was probably more that could have been done at that very early stage in terms of breaking down the barriers between the professions and trying to build dialogue and understanding about what each of the sectors do and where there are areas of overlap as well. So.
Thank you.
I wasn't sure we'd necessarily go all the way down the line, but that's fantastic. Are there any questions from the audience?
Again, speaking around one or two people in the room at the breaks, I find that I'm in Bedford very little different from anywhere else, in as much as the local authority seems to be poorly resourced in terms of its not ideas but motivations and the drive management of it by the members. Does good design rely on good council members is the question fundamentally behind what I'm talking about. Because it seems that if you're in a more parochial place, 30 miles away, it is the case.
I don't think it's dependent upon it, but it certainly helps. I mean, we're very lucky. We've got some very, very passionate members in Thurrock, and they're passionate about the place story. And we are pro-growth generally, so again, that is helpful in terms of creating and reimagining places. But it has to be more than just the members. You have to have officers as well that are enthusiastic, passionate about the communities that they're serving. And they need to have a willingness to be able to talk with individuals who work in a market setting and try and get that realisation and that understanding about what is not feasible, what will the market deliver, and basically just keep trying to drive and push quality at every opportunity. And that could be member-led or that could be officer-led. Members help, but I don't think they're the be-all and the end-all in terms of it.
Seeing as I'm from local authority, I'll say something too. I think members are absolutely crucial to the process because I think a lot of these decisions around kind of strategic releases and new settlements actually require political leadership, and it's difficult. And I think we need to have kind of courage of our convictions to kind of deliver these things and to make some difficult decisions. And they can do that by having really kind of well-resourced officer kind of local authority teams who can help give them the facts and the information they need to support those decisions.
So I was just going to say something from the developer point of view. I think if you look at what's happened to a lot of local authorities in the past 5 to 10 years, there's been an immense amount of change of direction coming out of central government. There's been the MPPF, there's now a revision to the MPPF, there's been pressure around housing delivery with the housing needs assessment coming through. That all takes a lot of time for people to get their heads around, and a lot of local authorities have had to divert officers from dealing with applications and the knowledge and skills that they've had in dealing with those, to dealing with policy matters, to come up with something that is workable for their area. So we've kind of seen a bit of a drain towards the policy side rather than the implementation side, in an era where we talk a lot about implementation. And I don't think that's a political thing with members. I think that's just the way life is, because what we're doing is becoming increasingly more complicated through the requirements that are being thrown at the planning, architecture, design, development sector in the country.
I mean, obviously, I'd agree with the comments that have been made. I mean, I think the important thing to bear in mind, members do an extraordinarily difficult job in this space, particularly in high growth localities. And I think one of the things we should reflect upon, and partly really what I was trying to convey, is we need to find ways of helping members elevate those debates into spaces which aren't a question of kind of throwing rocks at each other over the line, but really trying to express the choices that need to be made. I mean, all of us in this room, if we're from anywhere in the Oxford, Cambridge arc or in east of England, are facing real issues about housing choices for communities, and we need to think as professionals how we can help members in that debate, because fairly quickly, when you present communities with some of the choices that they're having to make, they're looking for some assurance, it seems to me, about the quality of place that we're going to create. And I agree with the comments. Of course, I'm extraordinarily lucky to have really able, enthusiastic and passionate officers. And I think that can help. But it is also important to try and find ways of helping convey to members the significance and the importance that actually society places around the things that we do in planning. And there are some difficult choices around funding and resources. And certainly Cambridge, Greater Cambridge isn't immune to that. But I suspect we'll need to be more creative about the role of PPAs. We'll need to be more creative about the way that we understand how much things cost, but then how much they cost to the community and how the development industry and others can support us. Certainly some authorities, we're going to Camden, I think, its major applications team is entirely self-funded because the PPAs pay for a lot of that resource. And I think there are ways of trying to say to members, here's how we can help you in this space, because their communities are worried about being overwhelmed by growth, about the power of the big bad developer and all the money that they're bringing to bear. And there are discussions about what kind of representation those communities want in that space and how we can help them with that. Because in fact, ironically, the development community is, in my experience, very sensitive to the issue about resources and capacity, and is very willing to help step in that space and through PPAs fund it.
So there's a question.
Yeah, thank you. My name's Keith Drive. I'm Chair of Planning in Norwich. Mine's a bit different to what you've been talking about up to a point. What really cheesed me off is when we grant planning permission for big developments and everything, and the company go bust. And this land sits there for years and years and years, and nothing happened. And the community are really getting upset. And you said, well, we've done our best. It's come through planning. We've agreed to this. Circumstances have done it. And this is happening all over Britain. And what worries me with this Brexit coming up, have we got enough materials in this country, being built in this country, to actually deliver some of our new big housing schemes and stuff? Or is it going to be more expensive, or do you think it's going to be more expensive to import it all, and the housing market will actually collapse and no one will be able to afford to build schemes like we heard about today?
I don't think we're looking at a housing market collapse in the event of Brexit. We have quite a well-developed building materials industry in the UK. They have historically had some supply-side issues. Where all the indications are they've been investing in recent years because they acknowledge the underlying fundamentals of the housing market remain really good, and that there is such demand for housing in the country. Whether that continues will come down to investment funding, mortgages being available, what happens with things like Help to Buy come 2021. Is that going to be continued by government? Is it not? In terms of the earlier question around sites, planning permission being granted and sites sitting empty, I think we have quite an interesting development world. In fact, we have generally an interesting world because there's an immense amount of debt funding where people will go and borrow significant amounts from banks, funders, and you can get money from pretty much anywhere nowadays. A lot of those developers may have spent more on planning applications than anticipated, or Section 106 contributions coming through. And schemes become unviable. If they can't proceed, then generally the bank step in, or the funder steps in, and then sits on the site until such time as it is viable to proceed. Or they find somebody that will pay them what they would like for their investment. Development, sadly, is more and more becoming seen as a cash cow, and there's a lot of things we have to balance in the development arena. Whether it's affordable housing, design quality, open space, long-term maintenance objectives. How do we deal with this? And I deal with quite a few local authorities around the east of England at the moment who are saying, actually, we don't want to adopt open spaces because we don't want maintenance, but we want them. So, okay, who's paying for those open spaces in the long term? And it's going down as far as actually residents can have a service charge on top of the council tax that they're paying. So then you start asking questions about, actually, where's the council tax going? Where's the new homes bonus that the local authority is getting for facilitating that development going? because it's not going in planning resources, as Stephen said, that there are quite a few PPAs coming around. And we support PPAs, and we've just worked with St Edmundsbury to do their first, which hopefully we'll sign later this week. But there is this kind of, there's an infinite pot of money coming out of development, and actually there isn't an infinite pot of money, because each area has its constraints, and we have to work out what we want to see nationally, what we want to see regionally, and what we want to see locally. Otherwise, we're not going to get housing delivery, and that's what we need to be focusing on, I think.
The government is currently reviewing the question of sites with planning permission that don't get built under Sir Oliver Letwin. He's produced an interesting analysis so far, and we look forward to seeing what recommendations he comes up with. I am working on one of the working groups within the Letwin review to come up with some suggestions. I think in relation to city sites that don't get developed, I think of one notorious one in Nottingham, which is still undeveloped after 25 years. All sorts of reasons for that one, to do with the Boots company, to do with someone we've not mentioned today, which is the Network Rail, and one of the most awful landowners conceivable, and other public bodies, the NHS. I can think of a large number of sites the NHS has sat on for decades without doing anything with them. So there are quite a number of culprits in this. And I think ultimately we're going to need to see much greater support from the government and resources to enable local authorities or Homes England to compulsory purchase sites that have stood empty for not the land banking argument, which I think is a slightly different one which he's looking at, but I mean the sites you're talking about where there's been successive ownerships and nothing happening. It's a totally different argument from the accusations around volume builders sitting on sites, which I think the jury is, that's for Letwin to evaluate. But those sites where it's just bankruptcy after bankruptcy, and then people in cities say, well, why are we expanding outwards when we can see so much of our city not being developed at all? And that, I think, we do need as a society to get to grips with these places that stood empty for decades.
Hiya, I'm Ione Braddock. I am an urban design officer at Epping Forest District Council, and via the public practice programme, which there's a slip about in everyone's pamphlets, it seems. I've just recently moved from working as an architect in private architecture practice into local government, into the council, and I totally agree that the kind of language, the difference in language between architects, between planners, between urban designers is a huge culprit in this kind of, it can lead to these slightly kind of provocative moments. But I also think there's a lack of understanding of the basic word of good growth, of design quality, and I wonder whether, and this is maybe for your flip chart, whether the whether actually the RTPI and the RIBA could be doing more together, more events together, or more actual case studies, visits for architects and planners and urban designers jointly to actually go and see examples of best practice and actually go to those places. I think you get a lot of, you can get the feel of a place sort of from photos, but actually experiencing placemaking and experiencing good design is a whole new thing, and actually it's something that a lot of planning departments, council-led, don't have the time to do. They might try and organise them, but they're difficult to organise. And I just think, as the kind of two bodies representing architects and planners, it could be something that could jointly be quite a useful resource to get people together and discussing what best practice is.
Well, since you mentioned the RTBI, it's great. It's been a great privilege to be here today. I think it's the second joint event I've spoken at, and it'd be great to see more. You do need to bear in mind, though, that we face in a number of different directions. So I could go to an equal event with the surveyors, or with the transport planners, or with the lawyers, and say, what we must have is much more joint events with the RCPI. So we do have a very limited management capability to put things on. It's been great actually today, because the RIBA has been very supportive in making this happen. So in principle, yes, but let's work out on the details. Particularly, I think one of the issues is Tom's opposite number. That kind of thing will be worked out at regional level, and then we from the main office can support it when you've done the ground.
From the Ministry's point of view, good practice and case studies and evidence is a key part of what we want to do. So over the next few months, we're going to be gathering evidence and case studies sort of in a systematic way that will demonstrate good design, good planning, good urban design, and looking at ways probably next year of how we're going to share them. So we're not exactly sure what format that's going to be yet. It will slightly depend on what we get, but certainly that sharing of good practice and evidence is key to what we want to do.
I think in Cambridge, we get lots of people coming to have a look around from sort of China, Sweden, you name it. Maybe I shouldn't say Sweden. But I think it's really important that you go on site and you look at developments and you walk around them. And I think we're always quite keen to show people around, because there's one thing about kind of taking a photo of it and putting it in a nice brochure. There's another thing actually standing on site and talking, hopefully, to some of the people who are involved in delivering it. And I think so much of what happens is that you kind of take a photo and people look at the aesthetic. They say, oh, what was that brick? Or what was, and it's not actually about that. It is about kind of good functional design as kind of the backbone of enduring places. So, we talk about kind of the bins, the bikes and the cars. These are difficult things to get right. And you can get it right, and you can come around and you can see how, people can park their kind of Range Rover, whatever it is, in the garage and get out of it. That means the garage is going to get used for car parking. It's not going to become a kind of a storeroom or a playroom or something else, and you can kind of use carrot and stick approaches to make sure that that kind of stays like that. But these sorts of things mean that you get the chance to deliver a high quality public realm, because your bins aren't cluttering everything up because they're in the right place. Your car parking is well related to the unit it serves. As we kind of go forward, people, car ownership in Cambridge is reducing. And so, on-plot solutions to deliver these sorts of things are really important, because you might choose not to have a car and then you have the flexibility to use that space differently. So I think as you kind of look at your case studies, it's about kind of drilling into what is the quality that you're trying to exhibit through that example, and kind of be kind of specific around the kind of narration that goes with it.
I think from developers' point of view, if we've got good schemes and local authorities would like to see them, particularly local authorities we're working with, then we always make the offer to come and look round. I know quite a few local authorities have been around Great Knighton. We took Brandon Lewis, who was Housing Minister a long time ago, around Abode at one point. We've taken quite a few different authorities around Beauty in Chelmsford, which is only a couple of miles away. But I think there's also a sort of requirement on all of us as built environment professionals. If you read about something, and we were having a discussion this morning about, go back 5-10 years ago, you actually had architecture in all of the major national media. And each of the big papers had their own architectural correspondent. There's now probably 2, Guardian and the Financial Times, who feature architecture. So you're looking at social media, and you're trying to find actually where is a good scheme, where would I like to go and visit. I saw a post by Glenn Howells, the architect, of a scheme he's done in East London, City Island by Ballymore. One of the best schemes. I went around there on a Saturday afternoon, just out of interest. Actually, what makes him say this is good? My Saturday afternoon, not work time, but walked around it and just, actually I can see how this works, I can see how traffic goes. People are out enjoying the park, people are out on the balconies, it's a nice development, it has a really nice feel to it as you walk around. And it's comfortable, and I think you have to have that natural level of interest and intrigue in our surroundings to be able to sort of influence your professional career.
Well, I agree with pretty much everything that's been said. I think it's great to hear that Essex is thinking about a quality charter, and it's been very successful in Cambridge and in London as well. I've sat in front of a number of design review panels thinking, oh my goodness, how's this going to go? But it makes you raise your game. It makes you think about things. It holds the developers to account as well. It's important, of course, that you make sure that the panels are well briefed, but I've found the process, generally speaking, to be a positive thing, and I actively encourage local authorities to engage with that. Because not all local authorities have access to the kind of skills that exist within Cambridge, but if you have access to organisations such as the Quality Panel in Cambridge or Design South East or some of these organisations, they can help you, whether it's through a design review process, whether it's through help teasing out a brief, or helping the council to understand what good design represents. I'm also aware, just where my other hat as kind of chair of RIBA East London, of the importance of raising awareness of good design, and we try and champion good design throughout East London. We're organising building visits so that people can explore new spaces, hear from the people who have been involved in the design process, because design is more than you picked up on it, Stephen. It's more than skin deep. You need to understand how the area works, what the problem is that you're trying to solve, and I think through open discussions with the people who are involved in that process, you can always learn something from it. I actively encourage it.
Two brief points, and it's one for your flip chart, Tom. Let's not forget the Young Planners Network, and I have no idea whether there is a Young Architects Network. Obviously, Tom, you're a spring chicken anyway, but I don't know whether there's a. But actually, there's an important point. The Young Planners Network in east of England has. I say this because one of my team is the convener of that, but has a social event network as well as an educational event network. And actually the dialogue could happen amongst not necessarily a fully serious kind of event. And we're certainly in Greater Cambridge keen to think about how we've been talking to the RTPI, how we can support that more fully, whether it's trips to places that are interesting. We've got some extraordinarily interesting places in Greater Cambridge, but Tom, I think there is something around breaking down those barriers through our younger professionals as well as the more kind of formalised pieces. And then the second thing is thinking about the way that design review panels and member development programmes can actually do some of that lifting as well. Every council has to have formal training for members on planning committees. I've always found it extraordinarily interesting visiting sites and talking with members around the schemes as you walk around them. And that's something that we encourage teams to go on as well alongside members rather than just individuals. And I think there's probably something as well in member site visits being supported by the development industry. In Haringey, we used to travel across London with a travel card to look at various schemes that Barclays or Granger or Pocket or you didn't go to the countryside one, but as part of a regular member development programme, because members, are also, in my experience, interested in this space, and the development industry can help, with stretch budgets in that process.
Can I just add on the younger professional engagement? I think it is interesting. A lot of my peers, we have quite a successful graduate scheme at Countryside, and we take on about 20 graduates a year now. Pretty much all of them go on to do an RICS type based qualification because there is a conversion course from perhaps a non-specific degree course. I don't believe it's something the RIBA offer. I'm not sure about the RTPI.
Absolutely, one year masters with a £2,000 bursary if you're lucky.
But those sort of other routes into the industry through the professional bodies need to be promoted in a far greater way. Otherwise, you're just going to keep seeing more and more surveyors or chartered surveyors.
Thank you. It's not a question as such, but just to add to what Stephen has said. The planning committee in South Cambs, I know in the past we've had, I think it's 2 visits a year where we're looking at the good, the bad, and the ugly. So this is looking back at decisions that have been made applications that have then been built out, and which members will sort of contribute to and go, well, this one in my patch is a good example. This one is not, and that one is an ugly one. And we go on a coach, just go around it a whole day, and it's just to give members, it's one thing to make the decision, but after it's been made, you can then see what it's like on the ground and use that as a learning for future decisions. So that might be something that could be, incorporated for other authorities.
Well, thank you very much. We're getting into the final sort of 5 or 10 minutes, so I'd like to open up.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh, yes, go for it.
It's just a question of colleagues in Cambridgeshire, and I say this for the fact that my husband used to work for Jonathan, for instance. Basically, I'm just saying, in terms of my husband's experience, he would come home and he'd be very proud of himself for conversations that he'd had with architects, developers, site promoters, where they'd been very, very accommodating at meetings, and I would be telling him about my day in Great Yarmouth, or my day in Redcar and Cleveland, or my day in Thurrock, where I am actively trying to get people to want to build in those locations. They're not necessarily biting my hand off. And you talked about, there's these wonderful sort of multidisciplinary teams and all this effort and work that's gone into it. And I question whether or not actually that is a reasonable approach in an area like mine, where land values and profit margins aren't as potentially as high as in Cambridge, and what key things we could replicate realistically in areas such as those.
I think it's a really good point. You look at kind of Cambridge and the hinterland, and it does feel like a sort of degree of privilege, because you've got an economically buoyant area, you've got a lot of kind of developers who are pretty switched on, but it's also fair to say we get our kind of fair share of poorly designed schemes with really kind of not architects, not kind of design really led, and those require a difficult kind of conversation. I think what the strength of that is that we have a very good track record of delivering excellence, and so actually you can kind of point to things and you've got almost kind of how to do it kind of on your doorstep. I think where things are more difficult, and in kind of the areas that you talk around, isn't actually getting kind of hung up on kind of materials and kind of, you think about public realm, complexity of kind of public realm and those kind of spaces. It's about making sure that the ingredients are right, and that you're starting to create a good, as I said earlier, a good framework. And those things are kind of enduring, whether there's kind of a lot of economic activity or whether it's some way where you're trying to encourage something to happen. So if you're getting the framework right, you are starting to put in the bones of a good place, and over time that may develop, it may take longer to do so. But I mean, we've sort of at arm's length helped Selby up in Yorkshire, and they had a terrible kind of site which they were trying to get off the ground with a really awful scheme, with a really awful design team. And an ex-colleague phoned me up and said, what could we do? And we just put a sketch forward and told them to kind of think about a certain consultant. And away they went, and they've got the bones of a really good place. And it was really quick. It was an hour of my time, and hopefully it will make a bit of a difference. So I think, just have kind of confidence that it's not around kind of the really kind of large units, it's not around kind of really expensive materials, it's around what components of the built environment are the most enduring. They are the sort of streets and the open space network, and actually those are the things that you need to get right.
I think the main thing for us developers is we need a degree of certainty. If you look at how much planning application costs to submit, it can be several hundreds of thousands of pounds. By the time you've engaged full professional teams, you've done various assessments, and I get increasingly frustrated when I go to planning meetings with certain local authorities, which will remain nameless, that actually the planners kind of get what you're trying to do, and then you get the highways department in, and the highways department just says, well, that's our book, that's what we want. And they're not interested in engaging in a discussion about actually what is the right design solution. No, this is our book. This is what we want. Don't give us anything we don't want. And actually our parking standards are, we want 3 spaces for a 2-bedroom house type thing, and unless your scheme's got that and these are a particular size, we're not interested. We don't want to have a discussion with you. We've been really lucky in working in Cambridgeshire where there has been that cross-discipline understanding of development, from Highways and Dr. John Finney and the team there, to Jonathan's team, to Stephen's team on the planning side, to the drainage officer, to pretty much everybody bar Energy and Water, I suspect. Sorry?
Network Rail?
I haven't had to deal with them. But they have wanted to create a place, and they have come to the table with an open mind. And they've been sat in those planning meetings, and coming along to a meeting isn't a huge ask when you talk about something that could be a lot, could be around 400 to 200, 300, 400, 500 years. We've got to get it right. We owe it to ourselves and the communities that we work in that we have to get it right. So I don't see why certain particular disciplines should have a, well, that's my book, that's what I'm interested in, I don't really want to engage with you. It is about that engagement and that discussion and that collaboration, which kind of brings you back to the theme of today.
I haven't always worked in Cambridge, and in fact I spent 9 years during the 1990s working in South Wales, trying to deliver quality in Swansea and the area around. And you're absolutely right. Sometimes you're on your own. We didn't have a big urban design team, and my experience of that is that, in a sense, you know, the local authority has quite an important role to play. So our members would meet with developers and say, this is what we're looking for. We're kind of really excited if you can bring this to us. And then the planning officer process was very much more supportive and collaborative about, it's not this, but have you thought about being able to do this? So we ended up having to do more work, effectively move further towards the developer. If we were to achieve what we wanted the developer to try and do, because in those days, and with the very marginal economics that underpinned house building, I mean, there was no affordable houses because the houses could not be built at the price of the houses for sale down the road. So it was that kind of environment. We found that we had a really enlightened advocate in the landscape team, because landscaping is not a massively, but well-considered landscaping is not massively more expensive than badly considered landscaping. And Swansea as a city is extraordinarily blessed by that legacy. We also found that, so it wasn't always in the building materials and the cost, it was in the thinking that helped create those spaces. But it is a case that the planning profession, you know, my experience moving from Swansea to London was of absolute complacency in the planning authorities in London, where the planners would just literally bat stuff away and expect the developers to keep coming back with a different scheme. That was all hickety-boo right up until the point of the recession, and then none of the local planning authorities in London had the first idea about how to promote and support development. And I suspect, you know, the work that you've had to do in Thurrock about encouraging and supporting and trying to inspire and kind of infuse developers who are used to, well, this is the product, you know, I'll go back to the board and ask for more, was about trying to then say, can we play the leader into it? Can we play key portfolio holders into it? To say our community deserves more. You know, look what's been achieved in Manchester as a consequence of that kind of confidence. But it's hard work. I think traditional boundaries between what planners might have thought they were there to do and what they then had to do had to change in my experience. You, of course, are always looking to try and ways of making a win by reducing risk or improving certainty and so on. But it's a challenge for the profession, I think.
It is interesting times at the moment. I mean, I know from my point of view at Tate Hindle, where we occasionally get asked by a developer to test the site, and which can be a frustrating process in certain instances where actually you didn't need to test the site. You could run an appraisal and realise pretty fast that actually it doesn't matter what design you put on that, it's not going to stack. So you then have to find another way in which to make it viable if for a scheme to come forward. And I think this is where the housing associations, and particularly, now they're changing in terms of the funding model is changing, so that they have an opportunity now to become developers. That's been coming through in the last few years. And furthermore, with now councils being able to build council housing, I think this is it could potentially be a bit of a game changer in terms of delivering housing in the short to medium term, where sites that were previously unviable for development can now be considered in a different way.
Thank you. I'm afraid we're probably going to have to wrap up there. So I think today's been pretty darn good, to be honest. I was talking to people during the break, and one gentleman I was talking to said that this was a dream come true, to get architects and planners in a room together. And I think I agree with them. We've had some really interesting discussion today. I think I've learnt a lot about ways that I can approach, as an architect, schemes and discussions with planners, about the language that we use and the way that we approach schemes. And I hope everyone else here has also learnt a lot. So I'd like to just thank Stephen, Mike, the Jonathans, Jennifer, Richard and Kirsty for joining our panel this afternoon. So thank you all, and I think that's it. Thank you very much.